Hey guys, tonight we step into a story that begins not with a golden crown or a royal decree, but with a simple shovel, striking dry earth outside Xi'an in Mukngin Chin Chambe Mubon. Tonight we'll uncover the silent mystery of the Terracotta Army, an underground force of thousands of clay soldiers, every single one with a different face, waiting in darkness for more than 2,000 years. You might think an emperor would want armies of identical statues lined up like toy soldiers, but instead, each of these warriors seems like someone you could bump into on the street. Why? And what still lies sealed in the ground just beyond where these silent guardians stand? You won't survive the curiosity unless you keep listening. Do you dare find out? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you right now, and what time is it? Maybe it's late in Chicago, or maybe morning sunlight is just slipping into Berlin. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture it, a group of weary farmers, digging for water in stubborn soil. Their shovels clanged against something hard, not stone, but a hollow surface. As they scraped away the dirt, a clay face stared back at them. It had eyebrows carved with fine strokes, lips pressed in solemn silence. Imagine the chill in that moment. You're searching for a well, and instead you've awoken a soldier who hasn't seen daylight in 20 centuries. That first glimpse was only a fragment of the grand design. Archaeologists rushed in, peeling back layers of earth. Soon, what had seemed like chance turned into revelation. Pit 1 stretched wider than 2 football fields. Rank upon rank of infantry faced east, as though guarding the horizon against invisible foes. Horses once pulled wooden chariots through this clay army, though time left only the impressions of wheels and the stance of equine legs. In Pit 2, cavalry stood ready. In Pit 3, a smaller chamber gave the impression of a command post, an ancient war room, and yet Pit 4 was left unfinished, as though history itself pressed pause. Was the emperor's death so sudden that workmen dropped their tools and walked away forever? Walking among them, you'd notice something uncanny. No two warriors look alike. Their faces carry an individuality we usually expect from portrait painting, not mass sculpture. One man's jawline is sharp and square, another's cheeks soft and youthful. A third seems almost to smirk, as though in on some private joke. Their hairstyles vary, some top knots wrapped tightly, others loose, a few showing regional fashions. It's as if Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, demanded not an army of statues, but an army of identities. Why such variety? Scholars suspect molds were used for ears, hands, and torsos, but artisans sculpted details by hand, tweaking brows, eyes, and lips to create thousands of unique faces. Think of it as the ancient version of mass customization, something like ordering your phone case today with personalized initials. Except here the personalization was an entire clay soldier, full-sized and meant to last forever. And forever is exactly what the emperor had in mind. His rule unified China for the first time, and his vision stretched into eternity. He feared death, hunted for immortality, and when he couldn't find the elixir of life, he built a kingdom underground that would never fade. Some whisper that actual soldiers posed as models, their features pressed into clay, so the emperor's army in death would mirror the one he commanded in life. Others argue it was less literal. The uniqueness of each statue was a symbol, declaring that the empire was made of many peoples, all serving one ruler. For a moment, imagine yourself standing in that vast pit, lantern light flickering against ranks of faces. The silence isn't empty, it's heavy, like a breath held for centuries. You might feel as though they're watching you as much as you're watching them. Their eyes, though unblinking, carry the weight of something more than art. And here's a thought to keep with you. If what has already been uncovered thousands of lifelike warriors was just the outer guard, what exactly waits deeper inside? Still sealed. Some ancient chronicles claim rivers of Mercury run around the emperor's hidden chamber. Others whisper of crossbows set to fire at intruders. If that's true, what else might be concealed beneath the mound? And will we ever truly see it? The clay soldiers, standing in perfect ranks, raise the first great puzzle of the Terracotta army. Why are their faces so different? If the emperor only wanted sheer numbers, a wall of identical masks would have been faster. Instead, every warrior looks like he once had a life of his own. Step close, and you'll see the jawlines change from broad and square, others long and lean. The eyes shift from sharp and narrow to wide and thoughtful. One soldier wears a hint of a smile, another looks hardened by years of battle. It feels less like staring at mass-produced statues and more like walking through a frozen crowd, as though a parade of people from across the empire volunteered their likeness to clay. Archaeologists have spent decades trying to solve this riddle. One idea is that real soldiers were used as models. Qin Shi Huang commanded hundreds of thousands of men. What if artisans sketched or sculpted from those very soldiers, preserving their features in baked earth? If so, then Pit 1 is not just art, but a census of the army itself, a silent roll call of faces that once marched across China. Imagine if one of those warriors carried your ancestors' cheekbones, passed down in clay. Another theory is more symbolic. The first emperor unified 7 warring states into one empire. Each soldier's uniqueness could represent the diversity of his new realm. Different hair knots, beards, and even armor styles hint at soldiers from different regions. Seen this way, the army wasn't just protection, it was propaganda. A clay chorus declaring, "Every man of every land now serves Qin." And yet, individuality didn't mean randomness. Scholars discovered that body parts were cast from molds in pieces, torsos, legs, arms, like an ancient assembly line. Craftsmen then refined each one, sculpting faces, carving details into armor, and painting the finished figures. Think of it like Lego blocks meeting fine art. The mold gave a base, the artisan gave a soul. The result is staggering thousands of figures, no two alike, yet all uniform enough to form a disciplined army. You can almost picture the workshops. Long tables with clay heads lined up, apprentices smoothing cheeks while masters carved ears or arranged mustaches. At the end, supervisors inspected each warrior, making sure no flaw dishonored the emperor. If you listen closely in your imagination, maybe you can still hear the rhythm of chisels and the mutter of tired hands shaping eternity. But the puzzle grows deeper. Why invest such effort in faces that, in theory, no one was meant to see? These warriors were buried, hidden, sealed away from daylight. Was the emperor so obsessed with control that he demanded individuality even in secret? Or did he fear that faceless guardians might not have the same power in the afterlife? After all, how can an army without identity truly serve its ruler? The individuality doesn't stop at faces. Each figure's posture differs. Some stand tall and rigid, others bend slightly as if mid-step. Their armor varies too. Some wear heavy-plated coats, others light tunics. The hairstyles reveal rank, from neat top knots of officers to loose buns of common infantry. Even the fingernails are carved, tiny details never meant to be admired by human eyes. You can almost sense the message. In this army, everyone matters. And here's the whisper beneath the clay. If every warrior is unique, could there be coded messages hidden among them? Some researchers have wondered whether patterns of faces or armor types might form a grander designer-human mosaic of empire. Nothing has been proven, but the thought lingers. The warriors might not just be guardians. They might be a map, a story told in thousands of silent stares. So the question lingers for you too. Was the Terracotta Army a faithful mirror of living soldiers, a propaganda piece in clay, or something stranger still? And if these faces were only the beginning, what further secrets will unfold as we step deeper into the Emperor's world? When you walk deeper into the story of the Terracotta Army, you begin to hear the hum of industry that once filled the workshops of Qin Shi Huang's capital. This was not the slow craft of one artist. Sculpting in solitude, it was an operation so vast and organized that modern scholars often compare it to an ancient factory. Imagine row after row of workbenches, clay dust drifting through the air like mist, the slap of wet earth against wooden molds. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of artisans labored here, each assigned a task, each contributing to the emperor's vision of immortality. The process began with molds. Legs, torsos, arms' basic shapes were pressed from clay in standardized sections. You might think of it like mass-producing action figures today, where the body comes off an assembly line. But then the magic happened. Human hands. Craftsmen refined the molds, smoothing seams, reshaping features, and carving details. A soldier's cheekbones were sharpened, his lips curled differently, his hair not tied in its own subtle style. What came out of the mold was a body. What left the artisan's bench was a person. This balance between uniformity and individuality was no accident. The emperor wanted efficiency. Thousands of warriors needed to be made quickly, but he also wanted realism, presence, the eerie sense that this clay army could breathe. In fact, some scholars believe work teams left their own subtle signatures on figures, tiny details or marks that identified which group produced them. It was quality control, but also a way for artisans to leave a trace of themselves inside a project meant to erase their names. And then came the finishing touches. Weapons forged in bronze, carefully fitted into hands, armor patterns stamped or carved onto clay, and finally, paint. If you could have seen the warriors as they stood fresh from the kiln and workshop, they would have shocked you. Their tunics glowed with cinnabar red, their armor shimmered with dark lacquer, and faces were tinted with lifelike pigment-spinked cheeks, black pupils, even traces of blue and green for trim. To walk among them would have felt less like touring a sculpture garden and more like standing inside a living barracks. The pigments were exotic, sometimes mysterious. One color, a shimmering violet, known as Chinese purple, remains a chemical riddle. It doesn't appear naturally, it had to be synthesized, meaning Qin artisans were not just sculptors, but proto-chemists, experimenting with minerals, heat, and compounds. Imagine a workshop where not only clay but chemistry was being tested at imperial command. But all of this detail raises a haunting question. Who were these artisans? Were they proud craftsmen serving their emperor, or conscripts forced to labor under threat of punishment? Some believe many were commoners drafted from across the empire. Others suggest captured artisans from conquered states were brought to Qin's capital and made to channel their defeated kingdom's skills into his monument. There is even speculation that, like the Great Wall, laborers might have been buried alongside their work to preserve secrecy. If true, the silence of the pits holds not just soldiers, but the echoes of exhausted lives. Think of the paradox: an emperor who united China by crushing states, who burned books to erase histories, still relied on thousands of hands, many from those very defeated states, to craft his eternal army. Each artisan gave a piece of his skill, perhaps even his face, to a clay soldier, only to vanish from record. The emperor's name endured, theirs did not. And yet, when you look closely today, it is their fingerprints you see impressed in clay. The scale of production was staggering. Archaeologists estimate over bedtime workers were involved in constructing the mausoleum complex. Not just sculptors, but miners, smiths, carpenters, and painters. A city of laborers moved like clockwork to complete a single man's afterlife fortress. For years, day and night, the ground outside Xianyang pulsed with this controlled chaos. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Why did it halt? The emperor's death in Haitramui, BCE, brought urgency, but also danger. Power struggles erupted, rebellions simmered, and the dynasty itself collapsed within years. The grand project was left unfinished. Pit 4, empty, its outlines a ghost of ambition cut short. You can almost picture tools left in haste, wet clay drying where hands never returned. What remains today is both awe and mystery, an industrial feat centuries ahead of its time, and a graveyard of forgotten workers. Their labor still breathes in every warrior's stare, reminding us that history's greatest monuments are built not just by rulers, but by the countless unnamed who obeyed them. And here's the quiet question that follows you out of the workshop. If the emperor's artisans gave him such realism in clay, what greater wonders might they have created in the chambers that remain sealed, untouched, beneath the burial mound itself? The warriors' faces and the workshops that shaped them raise another haunting thought. Just how closely do these statues echo real men of flesh and blood? Were the Terracotta Warriors portraits? Or were they symbols? To wander among them is to ask whether you're walking through an army of clay or through a ghostly roll call of Qin Shi Huang's soldiers, each immortalized in baked earth. Look closely at the details, and you'll see hints that these were more than random designs. Hairstyles tell their own story. The tight top knots of officers, the looser buns of common infantry, the sweeping headgear of generals. Armor patterns shift to lighter coats for archers who needed agility, heavier plated protection for spearmen on the front line. Even footwear varies. Some soldiers wear sturdy boots, others softer shoes, perhaps reflecting the terrains their units once marched across. These aren't arbitrary choices. They suggest careful observation of real troops, as though artisans studied the empire's garrisons and copied them in clay. Some scholars argue that the variety of faces and features comes from modeling actual soldiers drawn from across the vast Qin Empire. Remember, this was the first time China was unified under one ruler. Men from distant regions, Sichuan in the southwest, Shandong by the sea, the steppes to the north, were all conscripted into Qin's armies. Their accents, diets, and bone structures differed. And now, when you walk through the pits, you might be seeing those differences frozen in clay. Broad cheekbones of the western frontier, sharp features of the northern plains, softer jaws of the river valleys. If true, then these warriors are not just symbolic, they are literal portraits of an empire's diversity. They remind us that Qin Shi Huang's rule was built not on uniformity, but on the forced cooperation of millions who had once been enemies. Imagine how eerie it would feel to stand in front of a clay soldier that might, in some way, carry the likeness of someone who really lived, someone who marched, fought, and perhaps died long before his clay doppelganger was unearthed. Of course, not everyone agrees. Other researchers argue that while details vary, the statues are not faithful portraits but artistic exaggerations. The warriors may represent idealized types rather than individuals: the stern general, the youthful archer, the wise veteran. In this view, they are archetypes, meant to display the breadth of the emperor's forces, not the faces of particular men. If you think about it, both explanations are equally chilling. Either you're surrounded by thousands of dead soldiers staring back at you, or you're wandering through the emperor's imagined army of perfection. Consider also the scale of the project. Over time, some figures have been discovered so far, and perhaps more remain buried. To model every single one after a real person would have required extraordinary effort, sketches, sittings, or at least memory. But Qin Shi Huang was a man obsessed with control and detail. This is the same ruler who standardized coins, weights, measures, and even the width of cart axles to unify his empire. Is it really unthinkable that he might demand his underground army mirror the real one, feature by feature? As you let that thought settle, imagine what it would be like if archaeologists today could scan the DNA of soldiers buried elsewhere and compare it with the features sculpted here. Would we find uncanny resemblances? A clay face looking back at us with the bone structure of a man whose remains lie in another tomb. For now, it remains speculation, but the idea lingers in the mind like a whisper through the rows of silent warriors. And perhaps that's the deeper brilliance of the Terracotta Army. Whether they are portraits or archetypes, they blur the line between reality and representation. Standing among them, you find yourself asking, are you looking at art, or are you looking at men? The longer you gaze, the harder it is to tell. Which leads us to an even stranger question. If these soldiers were made so real, so lifelike, what did they once look like in full color, when every detail was painted as though flesh, fabric, and metal had come alive again? When you picture the Terracotta Army today, you probably imagine endless rows of clay-gray figures, silent and colorless. But that is only because time stole their brilliance. In truth, these warriors once stood in dazzling hues, as vivid as living men. Their armor gleamed with lacquered blacks and deep browns, their tunics shone with reds and blues, their faces carried blushes of pink, lips tinted with cinnabar, and eyes filled in with careful strokes of black. To step into the pits at the moment they were freshly painted would have been less like walking through a sculpture gallery, and more like marching into a living camp of soldiers frozen in mid-breath. Archaeologists discovered this secret in heartbreaking ways. When statues were first uncovered in the Mukngin Qin Chambei Muis, fragments of color still clung to them: patches of purple, streaks of green, even traces of golden trim. Yet within minutes of exposure to air, the fragile paint began to curl, flake, and vanish. Imagine watching a warrior's lifelike face fade to dull clay before your eyes, knowing you could never capture its original spirit again. Entire palettes of ancient artistry dissolved in hours, leaving only scattered records and photographs as proof. The pigments themselves are a story of wonder. Red came from cinnabar, ground from mercury ore, whites and yellows from clays and chalks, blacks from carbon soot, and then there was the most mysterious of all, Chinese purple. Unlike other pigments, this was not a natural mineral, but a synthetic compound: barium copper, silicate created by heating raw materials to extreme temperatures. Think about that for a moment. Artisans of the 3rd century BCE were essentially early chemists, inventing a pigment that wouldn't reappear in other parts of the world for another 1,000 years. To paint an emperor's army, they unlocked the secrets of high-heat chemistry. But beauty came at a cost. The lacquer used as a base layer was highly volatile once exposed. Without modern preservation techniques, the vibrant colors vanished as soon as oxygen touched them. It's a cruel irony. What once made the warriors lifelike also made them impossible to preserve. Today, when archaeologists dig carefully, they sometimes glimpse colors shimmering for seconds before disappearing forever. To protect what remains, entire pits are left unexcavated, waiting for technology that can stabilize the pigments before exposure. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the scene as it must have been. Thousands of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, armor gleaming, robes painted bright, eyes outlined to stare back at intruders. In flickering torchlight, they would have looked alive, an army summoned from clay but dressed in the illusion of flesh and steel. How unnerving must it have been for the workers who labored on them. Perhaps they felt they were building not statues, but men who might one day breathe. And beyond the soldiers themselves, horses once bore painted saddles. Chariots were decorated with designs. Even weaponry may have been touched with colors. Every detail reinforced the illusion of readiness. The emperor was not preparing for a symbolic afterlife. He was building an army that looked ready to march at dawn. This raises a haunting thought. If so much effort was spent on surface beauty, what about the hidden chambers beneath the burial mound? Ancient texts describe underground palaces with ceilings inlaid with pearls as stars, rivers of liquid mercury flowing as streams, and mechanical defenses waiting in darkness. If the surface army was so richly painted, how much more extraordinary must those sealed chambers be? Today, conservators stand at a crossroads. They know that beneath the soil lie more painted figures, untouched for millennia, colors still clinging to clay. But to uncover them now would mean losing them instantly. So they wait, holding back, as though the army itself has demanded patience. And so, thousands of soldiers remain underground, painted, but unseen, alive, only in imagination. Which leaves us with the chilling question: if the Emperor's guardians, meant only as the outer defenses, once glowed in such lifelike color, what deeper wonder saw Terracotta waiting in the chambers we have not dared to open? By now, you've walked among thousands of clay soldiers, imagined their lost colors, and glimpsed the artistry that made them almost human. But the greatest mysteries of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum lie not in what has been revealed, but in what has been left sealed. Ancient chronicles whisper of chambers beneath the burial mound itself, rooms brimming with treasure, protected by ingenious traps, and surrounded by deadly rivers of mercury. Are these legends, or warnings deliberately planted to keep intruders away? The historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the first emperor's death, left the most vivid account. He described a vast subterranean palace with ceilings painted like the night sky, constellations glittering above, and rivers of liquid mercury flowing below to mimic seas and streams. Crossbows, he claimed, were rigged to fire automatically should anyone dare intrude. Imagine standing at the threshold of such a chamber, torches casting dim light, the air heavy with poison, and silent mechanisms waiting in the dark. Even 2,000 years later, the description sends a shiver down the spine. Modern science has added unsettling weight to these stories. Soil samples around the mausoleum mound show abnormally high levels of mercury, far beyond natural amounts. Some argue this proves rivers of mercury really do exist underground, locked in channels or pools. Others caution that the readings could be misleading, perhaps caused by industrial contamination. Still, the coincidence is difficult to ignore. If those rivers remain, then the first emperor's tomb is not just a burial site, it's a chemical time bomb, one that could poison excavators and destroy artifacts in an instant. And what of the crossbow traps? Could such devices truly survive 2 millennia? Some archaeologists believe yes. Qin engineers were masters of mechanics, skilled in tension, pressure, and clever triggers. They left behind working crossbows and bronze mechanisms that still function today. Springs, carefully sealed and protected from corrosion, might retain lethal power. Picture an ancient tripwire buried in the dark, ready to release a bolt the moment a door is opened. Fiction, perhaps. But given the emperor's obsession with protection, it feels less like fantasy and more like forethought. It wasn't only defense that mattered, it was fear. Qin Shi Huang sought eternal security. He unified China through iron will, standardized weights and measures, built roads and walls, but he could not conquer death. His tomb became his fortress against the unknown. By filling it with traps and poisons, he wasn't just scaring grave robbers, he was preparing for cosmic enemies, dangers he believed might await in the afterlife. Imagine believing so deeply that even the spirits of rivals might attack you beyond the grave, and the only solution was to build a lethal labyrinth to guard your soul. Standing above the burial mound today, covered in green trees and quiet earth, it's difficult to reconcile this peaceful hill with the terrors that may lie inside. Visitors stroll the grounds, snapping photos, children laughing. Beneath their feet could be rivers of mercury, treasure vaults, and defenses that haven't stirred since Hai Chammur BCE. The silence of that mound is deceptive, like the pause before a locked door creaks open, and so archaeologists hesitate. The technology to excavate safely without destroying fragile relics or endangering lives still isn't here. To open the tomb now might mean losing everything inside forever. In some ways, the first emperor has won. Even in death, he controls access, daring us to try, knowing that for now his secrets remain his own. Which leads to the haunting thought, if we ever do find a way inside, will we discover wonders beyond imagination or dangers we are not ready to face? For all the wonders revealed so far, the most tantalizing mystery is what still lies sealed beneath the great burial mound itself. Archaeologists have uncovered the outer pits, the ranks of clay soldiers, the workshops where artisans toiled. But the emperor's central tomb, the very heart of his afterlife fortress, remains untouched, not because of indifference, but because of fear, ethics, and the weight of responsibility. To open it would be like prying open the last unopened vault of antiquity. Yet the risks are staggering. Imagine a chamber sealed for over 2,000 years suddenly exposed to air, humidity, and light. Delicate artifacts could crumble in seconds, pigments might vanish in moments, organic material could turn to dust. One wrong decision, and treasures meant to astonish the world might be lost forever. It isn't simply about discovery, it's about preservation. To wait is to protect, at least for now. Then there are the technical challenges. Non-invasive surveys using ground-penetrating radar and other methods suggest there are hollow spaces inside the mound, perhaps chambers lined with walls or filled with materials unlike the surrounding soil, but no one can say exactly what they contain. Some scientists argue that the rivers of mercury described in ancient texts would render the site lethally toxic. Others note that excavation might destabilize the mound itself, causing collapse. The idea of disturbing a fragile underground labyrinth without destroying it remains one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. And beyond science lies something harder to measure: respect. In Chinese culture, the tomb is sacred ground. To open the first emperor's resting place feels to many like a violation, a transgression against the ancestors. The Chinese government has officially chosen caution, declaring that excavation will not proceed until preservation technology can guarantee safety. For now, the mound remains inviolate, a green hill under the sky, holding its silence. Still, the pull of curiosity never fades. Scholars and dreamers alike wonder, what if the mound truly holds palaces underground, ceilings inlaid with jewels, traps waiting in the dark, and artifacts that could rewrite history? The Terracotta Warriors already show us the scale of Qin Shi Huang's ambition. If these were merely the guards outside, what magnificence or horror waits inside the throne room of eternity? And perhaps that is the emperor's final triumph. Even in death, he commands attention. He withholds the last piece of the puzzle, forcing us to stand at the threshold of knowledge, unable to step forward. His secrets endure because he designed them to endure. As you picture that sealed mound, ask yourself, do we dare open it, knowing we might destroy it in the process? Or will it remain a mystery forever, a story half told, guarded by silence and time? The longer you linger among the Terracotta Warriors, the more you realize they are more than just guardians of an emperor's tomb. They are silent storytellers of a ruler who dreamed of eternity and an empire that bent under his will. To the modern world, they represent one of archaeology's greatest finds, a bridge across centuries, showing us not only how the Qin dynasty ruled, but how it wished to be remembered. Each warrior's face reminds us of individuality, diversity, and the strange blend of art and propaganda. The clay brows and eyes may have belonged to real men once, soldiers who marched and bled for Qin, or perhaps they were imagined types, idealized faces sculpted to embody the strength of the state. Either way, they whisper to us that the empire was made of many voices, forced to stand together under one banner. The vanished colors tell another story that beauty is fleeting. Once, the army glowed in red, black, purple, and gold, shimmering like a parade at dawn. Now, they are muted, drained of life. Time has stripped away the brilliance, leaving behind something both haunting and serene. In their faded silence, you can almost hear the laughter of artisans who painted them, the shouts of overseers pushing them to work faster, the muffled pride or despair of laborers whose names are lost. And then there are the sealed doors, the chambers beneath the mound. Legends insist they hold unimaginable treasures, rivers of mercury, mechanical traps, even a starry sky set into the ceiling. Science gives us hints: mercury in the soil, hollow spaces detected by scans but no certainty. So the heart of the mausoleum remains hidden, caught between myth and truth, daring us to guess. Perhaps that is the most powerful thing about the Terracotta Army. They are not just artifacts to be studied, they are questions carved into clay. They invite us to wonder, Was this emperor trying to preserve his reign forever? Or was he desperately shielding himself from the fear of death? Did he hope to terrify intruders? Or did he long to walk into eternity flanked by men who looked alive? And maybe the reason we are still captivated is that the mystery remains unsolved. We are left with ranks of clay soldiers staring at us across time, saying nothing yet speaking volumes. The emperor sleeps beneath his mound, his tomb unopened, his secrets intact. In a way, that silence is more powerful than any revelation, because sometimes it is not the answers, but the questions that keep history alive. So the next time you see one of those solemn faces in a museum or a photograph, remember, behind every pair of clay eyes is a story we still cannot fully tell. Perhaps that is exactly what Qin Shi Huang wanted: an army that guards not just his soul, but the eternal mystery of his reign. And as you settle deeper into rest, let that thought linger, that somewhere beneath a quiet hill in China, the first emperor still keeps watch, his secrets safe for now, his silent army waiting patiently in the dark. Now that we've walked together through the silent ranks of the Terracotta Army, let's let the noise of history fade away. Imagine yourself slowly stepping back from the clay soldiers, their watchful eyes softening in the dim light. The clang of chisels, the murmur of workshops, the rumors of hidden traps, all of it begins to drift into the background, like echoes fading down a long corridor. What remains is only quiet, steady, calming quiet. The emperor's ambitions, the artisan's forgotten labor, the mysteries still locked beneath the earth, they are still there, sealed in time. But you don't need to solve them tonight. For now, they can rest. And so can you. The earth has kept those secrets for over 2,000 years. It will keep them still while you sleep. Let your breathing slow, in and out, as steady as the silent rows of soldiers standing at ease. With every breath, picture the clay dust settling, the torches dimming, the underground chambers falling into stillness. The faces of the warriors blur, their stern expressions softening into the shapes of dreams. Beyond the mound, stars glimmer in the night sky, and you can imagine the world above as peaceful as the hidden world below. The emperor's tomb remains closed, but your eyes can too. There is no need to wonder what waits inside. Tonight, the mystery is enough. So sink into your pillow, let the questions drift away, and allow sleep to take you gently, like a calm river carrying you onward. Whatever secrets remain beneath that quiet hill, they will still be there tomorrow. Tonight, all you need is rest.